Hello everybody and welcome to the Carlam Cymru revision sessions. The session this evening will focus on GCSE French and will be presented by Bethan Williams. The session will last around 45 minutes where Bethan will run through the relevant content. If you have any questions during the session, please use the question and answer Q&A section and we'll do our best to answer your questions. You will see that there's a hyperlink in the Q&A section. If you're happy to leave your name and email address, we would love to keep in touch with you so that we can send you information about future events. You can click on the link at any time during the session. Today's session will be recorded and the recording and any relevant resources will be uploaded to the e-sgol website under the Carlam Cymru tab. Thank you, Bethan. Over to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Richard. Evening, everybody. Hope you're all well. So tonight's session is focusing on the theme of global sustainability and environment and social issues. So if we just look quickly on the WJEC's different topics. So you've got the Wales and the world, the second theme, which is our area of interest for this evening. So it's the centre column, which you can see on the screen now. So that's the main theme. And then the sub-theme is global sustainability. And then the two sub-themes we're looking at is environment and social issues. Okay, so these two sub-themes are, like I said, the environment to start with. So obviously looking at environmental issues, looking at things like recycling, climate change, drought and flooding, pollution, renewable energy and fossil fuels, and environmental groups. And then the second sub-theme, social issues, looking at charitable organisations and events, fundraising, global issues, for example, poverty, famine, health and homelessness, and volunteering. Okay, so what I've done actually to start with is to look at what advice is given from the WJEC themselves. So seeing as they are the ones that create your examinations, it's only wise really to look at the advice which they give you. So this is taken directly from what they give the teachers, the guidance for teaching. So it says, at first glance, a task on the environment or social issues could appear more difficult than some of the other sub-themes. You will need to learn topic-specific vocabulary, but the expectations are the same as for all the other sub-themes. Okay, so you will need to give an opinion and refer to events in the past, present and future tenses. Try to write developed sentences by using connectives. You can incorporate more than one tense in a sentence, and you can vary the vocabulary you use to give an opinion. Okay, so as they say, it can look a little bit more complicated than some of the other sub-themes. So when you're talking about yourself or your family or your hobbies or your school, they may be a little bit simpler simply because maybe you've been doing them since year 7 probably. And I would have thought that this sub-theme is one that your teacher has probably left till certainly year 11, maybe towards the end of your topics. Okay, so this may be the one that you're doing now or one that you've just finished, and you know, it is quite mature. The themes that are covered are quite mature. So this is the advice that the WJEC continues with. They say to express which social or environmental problems worry you, and obviously you need to say why. Always give that justification of opinion. Discuss a charity that you support and what they do. Speak about something in the past tense. So for example, a charitable event in which you took part. So always having to discuss things in different tenses. Speak about what you do at the moment, so the present tense, to support charities or to help the environment. And then speak about an event in the future tense. So for example, a cake sale you will be organising, a fundraising event you will be attending, your plans to volunteer, how you will go about being more eco-friendly, etc. Okay, so this is the advice, as I said, taken directly from the people who will be writing your exams. Okay, so first thing I would like to look at is some knowledge organisers. Sorry, there's another one there. Say what young people can do to help or what people should do to help as well. So maybe conditional could come in here and some modal verbs as well. Okay, so let's look at some knowledge organisers. So again, this is taken directly from the WJEC themselves. So the first sub-theme, the environment. So if you look at this knowledge organiser, you may already have it or a similar one. So it has useful verbs, and I have got some revision exercises to do on these verbs towards the end of the presentation. You've got recycling vocabulary, so things to do with perhaps packaging, things like recycling itself as a noun, things like glass, plastic bag, paper, etc. You've got the imperatives, so these are the EZ usually verbs which tell you what to do. So the imperative gives you, it tells you to actually do an action, okay? And then environment vocabulary there in the sort of teal colour on the right hand side. So things like traffic jams, difficult words like oil slick. I think these things have come up in listening and reading exams in the past. Some practice on the conditional tense there at the bottom. So things like would, could, should. Okay, so there's a bit of a revision session there about how to form those verbs. And then some irregular conditional verbs as well. At the bottom, there are some questions to practice. So, for example, it gives the question, qu'est-ce que tu recycles? So, what do you recycle? So that's quite a closed question, really. You just need to say exactly what it is that you recycle. So, for example, je recycle le papier, le plastique et les bouteilles. So that's quite a simple question with quite a simple answer. A better response, or a better even question, maybe something more you'd find in a higher paper. Quel est le problème environnemental le plus grave? So that asks you for your opinion. Which is the most serious in your opinion? Okay, so you've got the superlatives in that sentence. Okay, and then the best one, the last one here. So comment faire pour résoudre les problèmes environmentaux? So you're talking about what you need to do to resolve these problems. Okay, I won't read all of that. Something you can do maybe during your revision. Okay, so social issues, the second sub-theme. So again, you've got useful verbs, useful phrases. You could also use some of these for the environment as well, obviously. For example, ce qui m'inquiète. So what worries me the most, the least. Really good patterns to use in your oral and in your written work. You've got key points. So for example, poverty, homelessness, famine, reasons for the social problems, things like unemployment maybe, poverty. Solutions then on your opinion. So what can you do to help? And this is where things like charities come into it as well. Vocabulary there again on the right hand side. Question practice, so basic, better, best. Good idea to look at how you maybe could improve upon the basic or the better sentences, and then try and emulate the best and incorporate those into your own revision for oral and writing to create your own sentences. Okay, the last box there, the present subjunctive, may be something you've gone over with your teacher. Some of these patterns which use que then have to be followed by the present subjunctive. So it may be that you've learned some stock phrases as they are in order to use in a paragraph, and there are some examples here to help you do that as well, and some irregular verbs as well in that box. Okay, so something that you're maybe, if you're aiming to get an A or an A star even, then these are the kind of sentences or the kind of patterns that you really should be aiming to use in your work. Okay, I've also looked at some other knowledge organisers, just trying to put them all in one place for you. If you print out this PowerPoint after this evening, then these have, a variety of vocabulary and some key phrases for you to use as well. And there's a couple here. So global issues in general. Okay, so there are some questions here, some useful grammatical structures, and then some more advanced ones as well. Okay, so what I've done for the rest of the presentation is to break down each skill in its turn. So from Unit 1, which is the oral exam, through to Unit 4, which is the written exam. And I've tried to break down maybe what you could do to revise for these skills and to give you some examples of past questions as well. So in the first unit, which is the oral exam, the the first thing that you'll have to do in this exam is the role play, le jeu de rôle. Okay, so I've got an example on the screen now of a higher paper. And again, this is on social issues. So the setting on this role play was that you are Skyping a pupil at a Canadian school and you are discussing poverty. Your teacher will play the part of the Canadian pupil. So on the left-hand side of the screen now, this is what you would see in your exam paper. Okay, remember you do have some time to prepare, about 12 minutes usually, to prepare for your exam before you go in, and you're allowed to take your notes in with you as well. So you speak first and it asks you to do 5 things, so 5 bullet points, one of which is always answer the question. So the question you don't see beforehand is more of a spontaneous speaking question there. So for example, say that you think it is important to help the poor, say a reason why people are poor, say what you did recently to help the poor, so past tense, this is the unseen, answer the question, and then the last, you have to ask your examiner, your teacher, a question back. So ask him or her which social problem he or she thinks is the most serious. So that is all you would see during your exam. On the right hand side, just to help you a little bit, I've given you what the teacher would see. Okay, so just to give you that unseen question and the answers which they would respond with as well, and what they would say after your bullet points. Okay, so the bold is what the teacher says, and then the rest is what the student would say. Okay, so 15 marks for that role play. So to be honest, I mean, most of these answers now you would be able to collect from the knowledge organisers that I have already shown you. Most of these you'd be able to produce now using those first few slides. Okay, so what I've also put in is the possible responses which the WJEC suggests the teacher is looking for and what the examiner would be marking. So for example, if I go back a slide, the first bullet point was, say that you think it is important to help the poor. So the kind of answer they would be looking at is number 1 here. So it doesn't have to be a very long sentence. You don't even have to elaborate. Usually we ask you to give a reason for your opinion, unless it asks you to do that, just keep it simple. Okay, so if you go above what you need to do, you may then make mistakes and lose some marks. So all it asks you to do is say something like, je pense qu'il est important d'aider les pauvres. They would accept any suitable response in the present tense. Okay, so something like that would have had the full marks for that bullet point. Second bullet point was asking you to say a reason why people are poor. So again, this is in the present tense, and this number 2 on the screen now is a response which they would have accepted. So les pauvres n'ont pas d'emploi. So that poor people don't have employment. Okay, so but any suitable response in the present tense would have been accepted. The third bullet point was asking you in the past tense, what did you do recently to help the poor? So we definitely need something in the past tense here. So for example, récemment, so recently, j'ai aidé. Make sure you pronounce the accent on the E. So j'ai aidé. If you say anything like je aide or anything like that, which sounds like the present tense, then they wouldn't accept your answer. Okay, so it has to make sure that that is in the past tense. And then the fourth was just answer the question. So now if we look on the right hand side, we can see that the question was, à ton avis, qui devrait aider les pauvres? Okay, so the key question there is qui. So who should help the poor? So first thing is to understand the question, obviously, and then to give an example similar to the one that's by number 4 on the screen now. Okay, so le gouvernement devrait aider les pauvres. You don't have to say les pauvres, it's quite obvious we're speaking about poor people by then. But the conditional is the tense that is being looked for there. And then the last task to do in the role play here was to ask your teacher which social problem they think is the most serious. And the way to ask that question, or one of the ways, is on the screen now, number 5. So, quel problème social est le plus grave? Okay, you could put à ton avis in there as well, just to make it a little bit a bit posher, but that would have had the marks given. Okay, so that's the role play. It's just an example of the kind of role play you might have on this sub-theme. This is another, so this is the second task of your oral exam, which is describing a photo. Now, a whole session has been dedicated to describing photographs during the Carlam Cymru sessions this year. So I won't spend too much time on this slide. But as you can see on the screen now, the picture is showing maybe a poor family, maybe abroad, could be in Africa or Asia. Obviously, these people don't have very much. They're sitting on the ground. They don't have shoes on their feet or socks or anything. So the first thing to do would be to describe what you see, but describing what's going on as well in this picture. So this again is the higher set. The difference between the higher and the foundation, as far as the photograph is concerned, the first question on the photo, the foundation, would be just to describe the photo, whereas the higher would ask you to say what is happening in the photo, so slightly more advanced. So the second bullet point at the bottom there would ask you, à ton avis, est-ce qu'il y a beaucoup de problèmes sociaux dans le monde? Okay, so do you think there are many social problems in the world? Okay, and then you could start by saying that you think the main problem or which problem worries you the most. So yeah, obviously we don't really want the answer of just yes or no. You need to elaborate on what you say. Always two further questions then that you won't have seen beforehand. So let's look at what those would have been on this paper. So the teacher's version on the right hand side. So these now you can see at the bottom there are the unseen questions. Okay, so for example, la pauvreté est le problème social le plus grave aujourd'hui. Qu'en penses-tu? And obviously you need to justify your opinions as well. So do you think that poverty is the biggest social problem or the most serious social problem today? What do you think of that statement? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Why? Why not? Okay, and then the last question on the screen, que feras-tu? So what will you do cette année, this year, pour aider les pauvres? So what are you going to do in the future or in the rest of this year to help poor people, and why? Make sure you justify your response. Okay, so that's a little bit of information about how this sub-theme could work in the oral exam, for the role play and for the photo question, the photo card. The conversation then is the third task in the oral exam. I am going to leave that until later on because I do think that goes nicely with speaking about the writing exam as well, so Unit 4. So we'll marry those together, look at what questions you could be asked for speaking and for writing. So I'll leave that for a second and move on to Unit 2. So Unit 2 is the listening exam. So I've put into this presentation this evening 3 sound bites, so they're about a minute long, and I'll play them once each just for time's sake this evening. But obviously when you download this at home, then it's something that you could do to play it more than once. You'd hear it twice in the exam itself. Okay, and then there'll be questions to answer on the following screens. Okay, so let's listen to the first person.
Je fais des efforts pour conserver l'électricité. Par exemple, j'éteins toujours les lumières en sortant d'une pièce et je débranche mon portable une fois qu'il est chargé. Je ne laisse pas fonctionner les appareils inutilement et je ne jette pas de piles dans les poubelles. Enfin, je vais en ville à vélo.
Okay, so all speaking about the environment, and I should have said before playing that all of these people do their best to help the environment. So all of their sentences and all their patterns that they're using are for the positive aspect of helping the environment. None of them are saying that they don't do anything. Okay, so let's listen to the centre soundbite, the second one in the middle. Oops. Try that again.
Pour moi, il est très important de ne pas gaspiller l'eau. Je prends une douche au lieu de prendre un bain et je ferme le robinet pendant que je me brosse les dents. Chez nous, on mange des produits bio avec peu d'emballage et je ne jette jamais de papier par terre.
Okay, and the third and final.
Cette année, j'ai participé au nettoyage d'une rivière près de chez moi et à la maison, on trie papier, plastique et verre. Quand je fais des courses, j'essaie toujours de réutiliser les sacs plastiques. Je voudrais faire plus de projets pour protéger l'environnement.
Okay, so like I said, they are all helping the environment as the best they can. So the next slides now show you some sentences about the people that you've just heard speaking about the environment. And what you need to do is to say whether these sentences are correct or incorrect. Okay, so obviously, you know, tonight now I'm not going to be able to give you very much time to do this live. So if you're watching it now, then you could pause the live session and try and do this this activity. Or if you've downloaded the PowerPoint, downloaded the video, then maybe you could do it in your own time in that way. Okay, so remember that all of these people do their best to help the environment. But what's nice about these is that you've heard people now use the first person. So they've all began with je and what they personally do, but now it's been changed to the third person. So instead of saying je, it's moved to il or elle. Okay, and I like as well that it uses some negatives in order to try and trick you with some of them. Okay, so for example, the first one here, il ne trie pas les déchets. So does he not separate his waste? Well, obviously that's a negative thing. If he does not separate his waste, then he doesn't recycle really. Okay, because it's in the negative. So I won't spend too much time now on all of these. I'll just put them on the screen for you. I would concentrate on whether it's a positive or a negative sentence and then say whether it's correct or incorrect for each person. Okay, but again, this is something you could do in your revision. So all of these so far are in the negative, but some of them, that does not mean that it's a negative connotation as far as helping the environment. So if we look at the last two here, so il ne va pas en ville en voiture. So he does not go to town in a car. That's a good thing. If he walks or he cycles, that's good for the environment. So just because it's a negative sentence does not mean it's negative for the environment. Same with the third one, elle ne laisse pas le robinet ouvert. Okay, so she does not leave the tap running. She does not leave the tap open or running, we would say. So I'll just put the rest on the screen. But again, something that you can do in your own time to revise. Just say whether they're correct or incorrect. Second screen, and I'll give you all the answers on the next screen. Okay, and obviously you could take these sentences, the ones that you heard as well, and then you could create your own sentences about what you personally do to help the environment. Okay. So the answers now are up on the screen. So each sentence is shown and then your answer and the correct answer then is on the screen as well. Okay, so there are two of those because there are so many of the sentences. Just to help you a little as well, I have also included the tape script or the transcript of what you heard. So you could do this as a reading exercise as well. If I were you, I would go through these sentences and maybe highlight or steal some of the key vocabularies, key patterns that they have used, and then you could adapt them to suit yourselves. Okay, so that was Unit 2, listening, just a little bit of practice on that. Third unit, so Unit 3, is the reading exam. So again, this has been taken from the WJEC website. So this isn't a past paper, but it is in their resources for students. So things like this you can find for free on their website. quite easily. If you just go into the WJEC website, find resources, and then look for GCSE French, and you'll have reading, writing, listening, oral help there, and some resources to help you to revise as well. So this is from Le Parisien, which is a French newspaper. So this is adapted from a real French source. So this is speaking about a charitable event. So if you went through this paragraph and picked out some of the key vocabulary and then answer the questions which will follow on the screen. So again, if you're doing this live, then you could perhaps pause the presentation, or if you're doing it as revision after this evening, then you could pause it in your own time. So the first question that is asked about this paragraph is to give 3 details about tickets. So when we're looking at something to do with tickets, we're usually asking maybe for a cost, any words for things like free. These are the kind of words that you'll be looking out for. So I've circled where the answer is shown in the paragraph, so I can see straight away that there is a euro sign. And when you're writing your answer, if a cost is involved, whether this be now the reading exam or the listening exam, if a cost is involved, please make sure you put the right sign, whether it's pounds or euros. You would not get the mark if you put 12 pounds or 15 pounds, okay? So make sure that it's in the right currency. So the details that I would be giving for this sentence at the very end would be 12 euros if you buy in advance. So the word prévente, so pre in English as well, means before. And then 15 euros sur place, so at the place, not or on place, or on the door, that we say in English, or at the time of the event, or anything like that, you would have got the mark. And then the last piece of information, it would be limited. If you see the E accent, often means ED in English, not every time, but quite often. So limited to 2,500 people or places. Okay, so that's where the answer was found there. So the second question that is asked about this article are what are local traders doing to help? So we need to think about what local traders would be able to do in this kind of event. So if I circle where the answer is, okay, the word for local traders would be just before that circle, des commerçants. Okay, and it's in the past tense, so on donné, again, E accent, past tense, des boissons, so they've given drinks, and I would imagine that they've given them for free, okay, because it's a charitable event. Next question. Name 3 things that will happen during the event. So if we look at the type of vocabulary that's in this this article, there's a lot of words for things like music, festival, artists in action. So obviously some kind of event for artists, musiciens. So we can see a lot of words to do with music. So we could guess that it was something to do with performance. So in the red circle here is where the answer lies. Sets, you know, and DJ is exactly the same letters, isn't it, as the English. And then just after that, prise de parole d'associations venant en aide aux réfugiés. Okay, so you've got DJ sets. You can say that just music is happening. And then the last one is a little bit more complicated, maybe, the talks from organisations helping refugees. Okay, so aide is a very, very important word in that sentence. Aide or réfugiés. Refugees, you probably would have been able to guess from that word. It's a cognate, isn't it? Okay. Who are artists in action and what prompted them to organise the festival? So we're looking at, obviously, for the words artists in action and a description of who they are. So in the red circle, it describes who they are. So des musiciens anglais. Okay, so they are English musicians. And then if we look at the end of that circle, la situation des réfugiés en Italie. Okay, so at the time of the writing of this paragraph or this article, there was a lot of refugees going over to Italy, and and this is an event that was organised in order to help those refugees. So English musicians and the plight of the refugees in Italy was the reason for organising the event. Okay, so there's a lot of vocabulary which is suitable for this sub-theme in this article, but then also things like to do with music festivals and things as well. So that could be done, you know, in a different theme as well. So lots of interchanging or interlocking vocabulary. Okay, so that was a little bit of revision for the reading Unit 3 exam. And I said at the beginning that I would leave the final part of the oral exam towards the end, because I do think it lends itself as well to speak about this when we're talking about Unit 4, which is the writing exam as well. So when you're thinking about questions that you could be asked to speak about them, or you could be asked to write about them in Unit 4. So what I've done on this screen is to collect some questions which the WJEC themselves suggest that teachers prepare their pupils to be able to answer. But it's for the oral, usually for the conversation, but could just as easily be incorporated into the writing exam as well. You could be asked to write an article or a blog or a letter. So thinking about these questions as far as Unit 1 and Unit 4 is useful. So for example, if we go back to the environment as a theme, then you could be asked, qu'est-ce que tu recycles à la maison? So what do you recycle at home? So this is quite a closed question. I recycle, and then you could name some packaging, for example, or paper or glass. All of these vocabulary items are on the knowledge organisers that I supplied you at the very beginning. Second one, penses-tu que la protection de l'environnement est la responsabilité des jeunes? So this is using young people in general, or young people specifically in the question, to ask you what you think your generation should be doing. Okay, so do you think it's your responsibility, or is it the government, or is it maybe everybody's? But obviously make sure that you justify your opinion here. So, est-ce que tu penses qu'il est important de recycler? Pourquoi? Pourquoi pas? Okay, it's always easier, to be honest, if you do say that you do try and help the environment. If you try and say, no, I don't do anything, then the conversation or the sentences really have come to an end. So maybe do try and say that you do quite a lot, so that you can speak maybe with a little bit more depth with your sentences. Okay, going into the past tense, qu'est-ce que tu as recyclé la semaine dernière? And use the question to begin your answer. Okay, so you begin your answer by saying la semaine dernière, j'ai recyclé, and then you go into saying what you recycled. Okay, le papier, and so forth. Future tense, qu'est-ce que tu feras pour aider à protéger l'environnement? So what will you do? So maybe you could say that in the future you will buy an electric car, or I don't know, in the future you'll make sure that you recycle more if you don't do it enough at the moment, for example. Again, all of these patterns are on the knowledge organisers at the beginning. This is always a good one to prepare for. Quels sont les plus graves problèmes sociaux dans le monde? Okay, so what are the main problems? What are the most serious problems, social problems in the world? So you may need to think, you know, quite deeply before you start to revise. What is your personal opinion, even in English? You know, sometimes it's quite difficult to answer these questions in your own language, let alone doing it in a foreign language. Okay, so you may need to think about these things beforehand. Est-ce que tu penses que c'est important d'aider les autres? So do you think it's important to help others? Or, again, it's usually easier to say yes, that you do, and say how you do that and why. Quelle est ton organisation caritative préférée? So what is your favorite charitable organization? And obviously you need to make sure that you say why as well. So give a reason, or several reasons if you can. And then the last question, que feras-tu à l'avenir pour aider les organisations caritatives? Okay, so what will you do in the future to help these charitable organisations? Okay, so this is by no means an exhaustive list, just an example of some questions that you could be asked in the oral conversation or in the writing exam. Okay, so make sure that you have answers ready to go for these questions. Okay, so that's most of the units now covered. Most of the parts of the units covered. There are some others. For example, you do have translation exercises in the reading and in the writing exams. So what I've done for the rest of this presentation is to give you some revision or general revision resources that I have collected from different sources, some of them from the WJEC, some from other websites and books. So for example, again, this is something you could be doing now if you wanted to. You could pause the presentation, whether it be live or whether you're doing this after tonight at home. So on one side you have actions, action, and on the other side you have consequences or conséquences. So for example, if we join one of the letters on the left with one of the letters on the right, so what can you do and what consequence will that have? Okay, so for example, if we look at A, fermer les robinets, so closing the taps. So when, for example, when you're brushing your teeth, that you don't leave the tap running. So is that an action or is that a consequence? Okay, if I look at, let's see, if we look at G, so diminuer les gaz à effet de serre, so to diminish the greenhouse gases, well, that's a consequence. So the action is what the person does, and then the consequence is what can happen as a result of that. So if I give you the answers at the bottom, but I would suggest that you write these in columns, maybe on a piece of paper or into your knowledge organisers in order to gain that vocabulary and patterns. Okay, so some key verbs here as well for this sub-theme. Again, if you're watching this live, then you could pause and you just need to translate the French verb on the left to English on the right. So I do have the answers for you. So if you want to do this live, then just pause and I'll give the answers on the screen now. So gaspiller, to waste, jeter, to throw, détruire, to destroy. So for example, the rainforests, for example, disparaître, to disappear. Allumer, number 5 and number 6, éteindre, go together. So allumer, to turn something on for a light, for example, or television. Éteindre, to turn off. So they go together, really. Number 7, protéger, to protect. That's half cognate. Partager, to share. Trier, we did see further back in one of the example questions that we had, the listening, I think it was. To sort, as far as rubbish. Sauver, to save. Utiliser, very similar to utilise, just another way to say to use. And then cultiver, to cultivate, so crops, for example. Okay, so I said as well that translation is required in the reading and the writing exams. So in the reading exam, you'll have maybe some sentences similar to the ones on the screen. So you receive the sentences in French and then you translate into English. And in this revision example, it's asking you to look at the si clause. So if this happens, then this could happen. So again, it's the action and the consequence. And if you could put those two things in a sentence, then that'll raise your mark for the range of language that you're using. Okay, and the complexity of the sentences you're producing. So for example, if we look at A, si nous utilisons les transports en commun, nous pouvons diminuer les gaz à effet de serre dans l'air. Okay, so again, if you're doing this live, then just pause and I'll give you the answers at the bottom. Okay, so I just looked at A. So if we use public transport, we can decrease the greenhouse gases in the air. Okay, I won't bother going through B and C now, something you can do as part of your revision. Okay, another revision resource I have collected for you is to do the other way around. So this would be more for the writing exam, that you would be asked to translate an English sentence into French. Okay, so this is practicing the phrase using the structure on and then a verb with ant at the end. Okay, so a way of using by taking, by using, by stopping, with different vocabulary. So if I give you the answer again, if you're trying to do this live, then just pause, but the answers are coming up on the screen. Okay, so again, it's cause and effect, or action and consequence. If I just run through the rest of the revision material I've collected for you, the last few minutes we have. So again, translation. So for example, ce qui m'inquiète, c'est la pauvreté en Afrique. So this would be in maybe a reading exam, and then you would have to translate into the English. And the second sentence, il y a beaucoup d'organisations qui collectent de l'argent pour aider les réfugiés. Again, you collect these sentences for use in your own maybe oral or writing exams as well. You could use these sentences as they are, or obviously you could adapt them to suit your needs. So the translations, if you're doing this as a translation exercise, are up on the screen. I have a few of these for you. I won't go through them all now, time is running short. But again, if you're doing this live, just pause before I give you the answers. So talking about refugees, talking about Greece, where a lot of refugees land by boat. I'm talking about what your school is going to do. So the future tense there in the bottom sentence. In the future, nous allons organiser un concert. Les sans-abri, not an easy noun to understand, is homeless people. So these are the translations for you. And then the rest of the revision examples I have for you, again using the seek clause. So if this happens, then something else could be a consequence. So for example, A and B use the si, nous. So if we, what could happen? So nous pouvons, we could. Okay, so what you had to do in this example is to finish the sentence with your own French clause. Okay, so if we take a bath, we can waste water. So that's asking you to take a shower instead. So lots of useful vocabulary, lots of useful patterns for you to use here. And then again, using these to translate what could happen, what could you do, or what can we do, using on peut or on pourrait. You could use it in the conditional. Again, so these are the answers at the bottom, using the si clause. And that's the end of the revision materials I have for you. Okay, so again, not the easiest of themes, environment and social issues, but it is definitely one where you're able to use some of the more sophisticated language and language patterns. So restez calme et bonne chance. Don't panic if it's in the exam. You know, it is quite a mature theme, but it is one, like I said, that you could definitely raise your marks because it is asking you to use some of those more sophisticated language patterns. So good luck, everybody. Bonne chance. Thank you, Mrs. Pritchard. Back to you.